The process of getting accepted into Sculpture by the Sea is quite of a rigorous curatorial process. The prize money was $50,000, and so we assumed we'd win that straight away. I've exhibited nationally around Australia, I've exhibited internationally in Beijing and in Switzerland, in Basel. A lot of my practice is around ecology and environment, and I'm very concerned about where we're going with all of that. I did say to the guys it was a long shot, so I was really surprised when we got accepted because it was such a big, unique, strange object. I first got interested in gliding in 2011, and then I bought my own aircraft in 2013, and been pretty well addicted to it ever since. I remember doing a painting. It was the 14th of January 2014, and it was this phenomenal day of storms and lightning, and it made such an impression on me. I remember doing quite a large painting of it. So, you know, there are elements that certainly impact on my art practice, yeah.
What's the rego on that one? Oh, geez, yeah.
Owen Jones said that he had an old glider he'd bought for $1, I think.
We bought the Blanik from a little gliding club down in the Stirling Ranges, and then in 2010 there were problems with Blaniks, so they grounded the whole of the fleet. And then the Stirling Club didn't have a glider to fly. In the Cranbrook Sire said, well, can you get those gliders out of the hangar? We go to developers near Park. We offered them $1 each for them, so that was how we came by the glider.
And we were just throwing around ideas what we were going to do with it, and somebody came up and said, oh, it would make a good sculpture. And look, that was kind of the germ of an idea.
Jeff said, well, I reckon we could do this. We've got all the skills and willing workers. We could make this happen.
We've got ASIs and altimeters and BSIs. Yeah, we need to get all that out.
Look, it was in pretty good nick. It hadn't flown for a long time, but you know, it was in quite good condition.
Well, I was delighted that it was going to be used for something, yes, because we bought it and didn't know quite what to do with it. It was taking up space there.
As far as the BSS members were, you know, getting involved, I did have a bit of trepidation at one stage because it was so different to what we do, isn't it?
Well, when Jeff first told me about his plan to enter the glider and the Sculptures by the Sea, I thought that sounds like a lot of work. We'll see how it goes.
It was a bit funny getting a perfectly good aeroplane, even though they were all grounded. It was still quite capable of flying before we started.
You know, I said to the guys, okay, look, we don't have to do this. But look, I got nothing but really positive feedback, and all the guys said, no, look, let's have a go. Let's have a crack.
What's your finger?
You know, we had over 45 people, I think, from the club that were actively involved, and most probably nearly as many again that helped out in other things that, you know, behind the scenes. So it was a really big club effort. I've had the site meeting with David Hadley. He's the original guy that set up Sculpture by the Sea. And he said, oh, look, I really, you know, he said, it's pretty ambitious. I said, oh, no, yeah, it's all right, because I actually was lying a fair bit because I had no idea how we were going to do it. The reaction at the meeting was very positive, and there was a bit of trepidation, maybe, you know, what are we letting ourselves in for? But having said that, I explained, look, this is what we've got to do, and this is the process, and these are the sort of challenges we're up for, because there are a lot of unknowns, particularly the engineering and, you know, how we're going to make it. The thing is, Greg and I talked a bit before, and he goes, well, you know, we've got to do this, and how are you going to do that? I have no idea. And there's a fair bit of no idea stuff going to happen. The technical and safety issues that we did have to comply with were very stringent.
The documentation they needed was very comprehensive. They needed a complete set of design calculations that explained what the loads on the structure, including the glider, were, and how we were going to accommodate those loads from a structural point of view and a stability point of view.
It is completely different to the way most of you all have ever worked, because there's no instruction manual.
The supporting structure needed to accommodate 80 knot winds, and of course the glider area is about 15 square metres, so if you multiply those out you can get wind loads of about 2 tonnes.
All the strength in the glider is in here. So you know, we can't do anything there. That first couple of metres need to stay in. But after that, we can do anything you like. Put a twist in it, and whatever we want to do. David Hadley's initial response to the concept was he's really enthusiastic, yeah, and the curatorial guys were enthusiastic. I think they were a little bit doubtful whether we could pull it off.
I'm an engineer, so I couldn't quite come to grips with all the arty work that he had in mind there. So that was all a bit beyond me.
Obviously, we want to sell and win the 50 grand, and there is a $5,000 People's Choice Award, and you know, we've got 120 members in the club and they all know 20 people. So, and believe me, that is how People's Choice works, right? It's whoever's got the biggest family.
Jeff outlined the project. He had sort of little mock-ups done, and everybody was on board. Yeah, it was just amazing.
Look, there was a very big team involved, and the skill base was very broad. We had about 10 busy bees up at the studio here, and the guys would all come up for the day. Okay, so what we want to do today is we've got to do the engineering works of the second stage of the fuselage. So that's Bob with the plasma cutter, and Owen, if you can do all the holes. And Sid, if you can start on the wings, and we'll start forming up the wings, and we want to get those really nice and schmick. You know, there would be guys that were very good, competent welders, there were guys that were very competent with wood, there were guys very competent with tools. So I would give them tasks for the day, and we would try and finish that, and we'd work for a day, and then knock off for the week, and I'd, get ready for the next busy bee. So, you know, because you've only got a little bit of a, so you'll need to measure that top piece there. Yeah, that there.
Yeah, there, but I'll go up to that.
There. Because otherwise there's a tiny little gap. Look, I have never approached a project like this before. I tend to work solitary. I'm a studio artist, so I tend to work out of my own studio. I don't do a lot of public art, and this is very much a public art forum, Sculpture by the Sea. An aircraft in itself is a really interesting kind of modernist object. It's something that we all know and recognise instantly. Not the fact that it's a glider, but that it's actually an aircraft, it's a plane. And then the more I thought about that, it was just a bit too hairy-fairy. So I was more interested in linking that sort of modernist object with something from a historical context, and that's why I put that classical column in. And it was about having a look at a couple of different periods, the modernist period, classical period. The first thing we did was got Greg Beecroft to do a lot of the drawings, and once he'd worked out the drawings and worked out the parameters of how we were going to build it, particularly the frame, how the whole thing was, the hanging device, the complete time frame of the project was we got given the nod on the 18th of August, and essentially from the 18th of August it was full on. We had a very tight timeline in construction, in getting all the engineering together, getting all the permits over the line, getting it painted, getting it transported, getting it down to Sculpture by the Sea on the 28th of February.
My early involvement was in the construction in the fuselage area, because you know that it had to meet very stringent engineering standards, and it wasn't allowed to blow away in the wind. Now, there were a lot of bulkheads and things that had to be welded and bolted in there, and I had the dubious honour of drilling the thousands of holes where all the bolts went in.
Well, the rear end of the glider had to be modified severely because Jeff's idea was to have the spiral behind the wings and the tailplane, and so we had to cut out a section of the fuselage between those two and replace it with a tube with the spirals wound around it.
Greg, he engineered the structure from a safety point of view, and that required some steel input because the glider was predominantly made out of aluminium, and that aluminium needed support. So we ended up putting a big tube in there with steel bulkheads that had to be cut to size and shape and then welded in situ. Jeff was indicating that we needed to put an actual point in there to put the column to attach to the glider. And that hole needed to be cut, and we also needed access into the fuselage to put the bulkheads in. Jeff and I took some time to work out how we were going to get this bulkhead into the fuselage without cutting more of the fuselage than what he desired.
Well, then, you know, I wonder whether we should just leave it out. We need to work out if we can get the bloody thing in. That's the only thing. Because otherwise, when we actually come to do the T-junction, we don't want to be mucking around with it. So actually, I suppose really we do need to see whether the bath is going to fit.
So that's got to be, and it could be anywhere up and down in there.
Higher rather than lower, most probably. Yeah, okay. I felt as though we had to do something, you know, rather than just leave it as is, because it really just becomes a big found object, which is what I wanted to avoid. Grant Rooks came up with the idea of slicing the wing up into sections, about 100 mil apart, and then we basically just put those up and formed them, and then put a steel inside those, and then a 2-pack, and then slowly built it onto that.
The process of forming those wings up was quite a difficult one. Grant obviously did some of the major structural work, and it was quite important to make sure we retain the strength in the wing. As you all know, when you get a bunch of great minds together, everyone's got their own idea how they're going to do it.
Okay, so it's sort of got, well, if we do this one first, I think it's thick enough.
Well, because of the different chemicals we were using on the wing, we were having problems there getting the sculpture right, moulding it right, sanding it right. So there was a fair bit of input and consultation there, just trying to get that all together.
No, it's just running a bit. I'm just going to put a bit more air bubble in it.
Is that this stuff, is it?
No, it's
okay.
It's that stuff you rubbed off the wing.
The problem is, but that being a lot harder, when you start to rub it, that'll sit proud and you'll take all this away. Understand?
That's a very good point.
I end up rubbing everything away just trying to get that off.
Trying to get that away.
The only reason I say that, because there was a little bit somewhere up there,
yeah,
and I kept going down, I rubbed everything away, and then there was a mound of this stuff sitting there, you know?
Yeah.
And that's what I was trying to get off.
Look, I think we will. Let's do 2-pack. The critical bit was to make sure they were both exactly the same. But yeah, it worked very well. But basically, what's got to happen, Roy, is about 80% of this has got to come off, right, and then we'll build it back up.
Yeah, it was great being a sculptor, doing the cutting back the resin or the bulb on the wing, but I've never really done anything like that before, and it was all a new experience for me, and you know, it took shape eventually. It was good fun.
You know, take it, so that's the level we know, right, and this level we don't know. So basically keep going back and see how Sid's got that.
Whatever you do, don't go too deep.
Yeah, don't go too deep. But you can see what the sort of thing we're looking for there.
Yeah, okay. You see, Roy, you look like you're oozing this confidence there. Let me out everything.
I thought Sid was having a bit of a go at me. Roy, you're not handling that too well.
Yeah, well, I was giving a fair bit of advice to a few of the people, mainly Roy there, but he's a farmer, so you've got to forgive him for that. So we try and sort of guide him a bit and show him how to cut and sand and everything like that. You know, it's a lot different to chopping up wheat and that.
Look, there were a few days, I must admit, I woke up in cold sweat. I could see that we had the potential for the wheels to come off, but the guys always rose to the occasion. If I needed guys to come up and finish off a big series of work that needed to be done, you know, we always had to get over the line. Tail section 2, Grant did a lot of work on, and we ended up using a foam rubber and twisting the foam rubber and then putting 2-pack over that and fiberglassing it.
Is it movie or?
Movie.
When it came to painting it, I had a very good friend called George Haynes, who's I think must be one of the most amazing painters and colourists in Australia. And he came up and I said to George, what do you think? And he was very keen on trying to get some kind of reflection from the beach and using pastel colours. And It did kind of appeal to me, and even using stripes and all the rest of it, but it also became a logistical problem, how we were going to do it, and also it was going to cost a lot more money. So I decided to actually just go with one colour. When you're on the beach there, you're dealing with big patches of colour, big patches of blue sky, big patches of white sand, big patches of blue ocean or greeny ocean, and so I really was thinking around a big patch of red to stay within that context.
Actually, Mike's going to be taking most of the weight. Hang on. Yeah. So we just got to make sure when we're doing it, it can only lift from here back.
The loading process and the sense of trepidation was acute.
Hang
on, whoa.
Fuck. Every time there's a crack, it's damage. Every time we do it. So you have to go slowly.
And you can imagine we've done this for 6 months, and so there's a big investment in the actual object from a lot of different people. And so this is where you can really do the damage. So
Ready, go! Right, I got it. Right, we go.
I haven't got much.
That's not too bad. It's all down here.
It only requires one mistake and the whole thing can unravel.
That's all right, we got him. Mike, put it down. Mike, put it down.
I don't know whether you can put it.
No.
It's might break.
Yeah, you hold it there, Al. Good on you. See it across. Okay, yeah, over towards you. Right, now, Mike, I'm going to need a hand here.
Now, hang on, I got the weight.
You're inside, it's in the back. Lift it up on him. Go, ready. Okay, coming down. Okay.
Well done.
Get on film. Oh, good on you.
I was sure that the engineers would get it onto the trailer okay, and it'll be all there. I was a bit apprehensive about how it was going to get down to Cottesloe.
So you've got to be so careful in getting this very, not fragile object, but certainly difficult object to transport, getting it onto a transport system, transporting it nearly 100 kilometres without scratching it, breaking it. And so, yeah, it was a very tense couple of days getting it down there.
So guys, we'll set up camp here, okay? This will be base camp here.
The morning we installed the glider, I was quite confident that we'd covered most of the bases. Because I've been in a lot of exhibitions and it's required a fair amount of logistics and transport, I know, and a couple of times it has happened to me where I've got to an exhibition, you know, there's some damage or I've had to fix something up. You know, that is the nature of the work. So I was a bit concerned, but you know, we had nearly 20 or 30 very competent guys turn up and give us a hand. Having said that, there were some very tense moments as we moved around. The plan changed, interestingly, when we got there. We'd actually designed the whole install with the existing equipment, that we had a crane that would reach and be able to lift it out onto the column. And then David Hadley came along and he said, no, well, I want it moved another 10 metres out into the beach, which was fantastic, but we didn't have the gear to do it.
We need to check that he can actually drag it because you know, it's 3.5 tonne.
Yeah, it's a bit to drag. My first thought was that, okay, if that's what's required, we put our little thinking caps on and have a look, see how we're going to achieve that.
So initially we tried rolling the crane on the sand, but it got bogged.
Well, when David Hadley decided he wanted that further out into the beach, even though the location was obviously a lot better, there were some logistical problems of trying to get that thing out of there. The equipment we had certainly couldn't swing it all out that far. The concrete block that we brought out, that was 3.5 tonne from memory. It needed to be because you get those sea breezes and that big plane sitting on top, we didn't want to take off.
And so I designed the foundation to be strong enough to support the heavy wind loads, and BGC built it and delivered it to site for us.
So that was great for them to donate that, and a lot went into the design of that as well.
The post was steelwork, which had to be fabricated, and that was fabricated by Jin Fabrication, and they did quite a good job. It made site assembly quite easy. The foundation bolts had templates built into the foundation so that they would match the base plate.
When the column came out, I was just in awe of the crane drivers who were dropping it to exactly where they wanted it.
It had a big ring of bolts there, and if Murphy's Law, if one of them was going to be in the wrong place, that was what was going to happen, and sure enough, that was what happened.
Everybody focused completely on that particular problem, and it took a very short time for somebody to work out which bolt was not lining up.
So it was easy to spot the problem, it was probably not quite so easy to fix it.
Pretty close. Let's try that.
And what was the orientation again, Greg? Was it like that one? Yeah. So, you want to drop it down a bit more?
Yeah, it's going.
You going?
Yeah, it's going.
No, that's not.
Yeah, it's going.
All right, if you can put a thread on that, right? Yeah, you can wriggle it through.
Put a nut on it and we can wind it out. Yeah, put nuts on everything.
She's gone.
Can we get some buckets and some cloth, guys? There's some in the ute. You know where all the buckets and cloth went? We need to give this a wipe down now. It's got all that dust in it.
I was quite confident that we could drag the whole assembly across the sand because we had a very large tracked digger and we had some very strong anchorages in the concrete base.
We put the glider on here now while it's in this position, which is straightforward. We use the crane.
Yeah.
And then we drag the whole thing over very slowly.
Why don't we do that?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
I think we overcame all sorts of obstacles by thinking sideways and looking at the most appropriate way of dealing with it.
So then we thought, well, we'll just build the sculpture within reach of the crane as planned.
If we bolt the whole bloody thing in and just slowly. Join up the electrics.
Well, yeah, the glider hanging in the air was a bit of a concern. Well, fortunately there wasn't too much wind, but the thought comes to mind of if a chain broke, our sculpture's going to be in pieces on the ground.
I had utter faith in the crane drivers who knew exactly what they were doing there. The winds weren't too bad, so I was never worried at that stage. Maybe Jeff was.
But as it turned out, we just still put the whole thing together, and then in consultation with a couple of the guys said, well, what do we do? And all we could do was actually tow it very gently out the last 10 metres.
And I didn't think it could be done, but the guys there said, no, we'll just put it on there and drag it across the beach.
Although we had a 2.5 tonne dead man block of concrete underneath it, there was still a worry whether it might topple over.
As I was involved in some of the superstructure of the glider, my little part of it, that the welding and the fabricating part of it, would hold up to the pushing and pulling and tugging and all that sort of stuff.
And it worked and it didn't fall off, and it was a great relief. That's a long, what's it, 6.5 months? Yeah, it's been a long build, but yeah, no, it's good. You know, all the guys have chopped in, and I think I think everyone's had a good time.
Yeah.
Haven't lost any mates, that's always important. A few tense moments from time to time, but no, it's good. And I think it's a good work. I'm really pleased with it. Once we'd got it installed, it was a bit of an anticlimax in some response, but I was a very relieved sculptor at that point in time. You know, I think it certainly resonated with a lot of people that go down to see Sculpture by the Sea. We had some fantastic response to people commenting. We had people down there keeping an eye on it. You know, we had really good feedback from people that were going along and seeing it. Yeah.
I felt a huge sigh of relief because it was a long haul and I just couldn't wait for it all to be over at the end of the day. It was bigger than Ben Hur, perfectly honest.
You don't know how these things get judged. You have judges that on that day maybe into modernist work or not into modernist work. It's impossible to judge. The people choice side was interesting. We came third, and apparently it was a very close run between second and third. So yeah, that was pretty gratifying. It was well received within sort of that public context.
Once it was all up there and sitting in the breeze and everyone was looking at it, there was quite a sense of achievement there. It was very satisfying.
The only thing I would most probably say in terms of the whole project, the culture of the club is very supportive.
Well, I've been involved in quite a few clubs in the past and have seen different cultural outcomes. And I would say that Beverley Soaring Society has probably got the best that I've ever seen in my life.
Jeff, of course, is a great project manager. He's great at communication, he's great at planning. I couldn't speak more highly of Jeff's project management skills.
It was great to see the project actually go from Blanik that would never fly again to something that was viewed and appreciated by thousands of people at Cottesloe Beach.
Well, if Jeff proposed one of these projects again, I'd certainly say it's not happening.